Welcome to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast, a relaxing and informative show where we explore anxiety, panic, and PTSD, sharing how you can overcome them for life.
Aloha! Welcome back to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. I'm your host and coach, Gina Ryan, and I am so happy to be with you again today as together we can consider the many ways to bring your mind and body back to its natural peace and calm. In today's episode, I'm talking about wings of courage. This episode is about flying anxiety. I realized I haven't done an entire episode on flying anxiety, so here we go. There's a lot that goes on when someone is anxious about flying, so hopefully you will hear, if you are anxious about flying, yourself in some of this that we go over today. Actually, this is just part one. The next episode 1031, will be part two of the flying anxiety. So, if you have flying anxiety, you may have been diagnosed as having a phobia, or you may have just been diagnosed as having an anxiety disorder because that specific phobia is under anxiety disorders. But people with flying anxiety often experience overwhelming fear, panic, stress, or distress when faced with the prospect of flying or during the flight itself. And this fear may be triggered by a number of different factors. It could be fear of heights, believe it or not, fear of enclosed spaces, very common, fear of loss of control, very common, or past traumatic experiences related to flying. You may have had a traumatic flight where there was a lot of turbulence or there was something going on in the plane, and that could have set you up in the back of your head. You linked those scary feelings that you were having with the plane, and it just replays itself when you have the opportunity to fly again. And lots of people have feelings with the prospect of flying coming up. As soon as they know they're going to be flying somewhere, the anxiety begins to start spinning. And now where we want to end up eventually is to have these feelings that come up around flying to be separated out from the feeling of excitement, because often we are not only maybe nervous about flying, but we could be excited too. And we want to be able to tease those out and actually begin leaning more toward the feeling of excitement and being curious versus thinking that all of the feelings that we are experiencing are about panic. Of course, that's where we go naturally, but they don't have to all be from panic. We could be actually excited, because sometimes we get the feelings and immediately we go to, I must be going to have a panic attack. But the feelings could be triggered originally by excitement. Now, flying anxiety is relatively common, and it affects a significant portion of the population. While precise prevalence rates vary depending on the study and the population that was surveyed, but research suggests that approximately 2 to 6% of the general population experience an actual fear of flying to some degree. There's also a larger percentage of individuals who may experience mild to moderate anxiety about flying without meeting the criteria for clinical diagnosis of a specific phobia. I think that's absolutely what really happens is people are nervous. People are nervous about flying. Who likes to be sitting all, like little sardines in a can, right? It's not comfortable to begin with. We are probably having an element of excitement or something's happening at the other end of the flight. That all gets mixed in. It isn't just the flight itself. Now, flying anxiety can occur in people of all ages and backgrounds, although it may be more common among certain demographic groups, such as individuals with a history of anxiety disorders or people who have experienced traumatic flying events. Thinking that you're the only one on the flight who is nervous or even anxious is just inaccurate. Even if people don't use the label of being anxious about flying, it's very common for people to feel uncomfortable or ill at ease to be on the plane. So let go of the added fear of you being the only one feeling uncomfortable on that plane. You are in good company. And if we can all just know that about the plane, that there's a lot of anxious or nervous flyers, we can relax a little bit that we are the only one who might be sweating or having clammy palms from being there on the plane. Flying anxiety can have a really big impact on all types of aspects of your life, including you could be having limitations on your travel. People with flying anxiety often avoid air travel altogether, or they experience a lot of distress when faced with the need to fly. So this could start restricting your ability to travel for work, for fun, for family outings, for leisure, leading to missed opportunities and a decreased quality of life. Not to mention the sheer exhaustion of suffering a panic-ridden flight for business or pleasure. So the fear and anxiety associated with flying can significantly diminish our quality of life, causing us more distress, more discomfort, and a sense of restriction. And then we begin to think, look, what's wrong with me? Why do I not do this? Then we get hard on ourselves. And it may also interfere with daily activities, social interactions, impacting relationships, and our overall well-being. For some people whose profession requires frequent air travel, this fear of flying, this panic about flying, can interfere with your career opportunities. Flying anxiety can pose significant challenges and limitations with your job. Fear of flying can impede career advancement opportunities. It can hinder your job performance. It could contribute to job-related stress. Flying anxiety can take a toll on our mental health, leading to persistent feelings of fear, anxiety, and more stress. It may also contribute to other psychological symptoms, such as if you suffered from depression or have had panic attacks elsewhere, or having new avoidance behaviors. This really impacts our well-being. So I can tell you that it is well worth the effort to begin to find your way through this fear of flying, to find your way through it. Now, maybe you don't like to fly. That's fine. Not everybody needs to get on a plane. But if you are wanting to fly, but you are having difficulty doing it, it is well worth the discomfort and the time and energy to find your way through it. So there can be some psychological factors that are around flying anxiety. And that would be, like I mentioned earlier, the fear of heights, the fear of enclosed spaces, and the fear of loss of control. That's a big one, believe it or not. I hear this all the time. It could be that you have previous negative experiences. You could be afraid of flying because you have a lack of knowledge about flying. And another thing that comes up, and this is really common, is sensory overload. When you fly, there is a lot of sensory overload. There's noise, there's turbulence, the pressure in the cabin changes, and sensitive people feel these things deeply. Not to mention all the hubbub about even getting to the plane. So I wanted to describe some of the symptoms of flying anxiety so you can maybe be clued into what could be happening. If you are experiencing the rapid heartbeat, the shortness of breath, sweating, like I said, sweaty palms earlier, or nausea. I remember flying when I was anxious. I didn't know I was anxious. I just thought I was a little kooky. One time, and I was really nauseous and uncomfortable landing. And I think that I was probably having some anxiety. Now, when I look back on it, like I said, I didn't know at the time, but I was very nauseous. I remember the flight attendant, even during landing, bringing me crackers. I thought it was very sweet. But back to the symptoms of flying anxiety. There could be emotional type symptoms, right? The panic attacks, the intense fear or dread. That was my MO. I had dread. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew it was going to be something awful was going to come down and happen. And feelings of helplessness. And that goes along with, traveling, but you have no control over it, right? So you can see where these things begin to tie together. And then there could be behavioral symptoms, such as avoidance of flying, or using medication to fly, or using excessive alcohol to fly, and having difficulty concentrating. So we know that being afraid of flying can impact us. Remember, we could have limitations on how we can travel, causing a decreased quality of life, interfering with our career opportunities. It could put a strain on personal relationships. You could also have some coping strategies that I want to discuss here quickly. Education and information can be so helpful as a coping strategy, as can learning relaxation techniques, such as the longer, slower exhale, or if you have any deep breathing exercises that you have come to love and practice, the plane is a perfect place to do them. You could also do my 10-minute body scan meditation. That's great to do on the plane. People who say they don't have time to do it, or they don't have time to meditate. That long flight is the perfect time. Grab the 10-minute body scan meditation for your next trip. The link is in the show notes, or just grab it on our website. Cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT could be helpful. DBT could be helpful. Talking to your therapist, talking to a coach, actually getting this out in the open that you are actually struggling with this can be very helpful, as can exposure therapy. And I'm planning to do an entire episode on exposure therapy in the future. So look for that in the future. Medication options are available, and this is so much more common than I thought, which is why I'm sure that you are not the only one on the flight feeling nervous, because I hear so many reports of people using medication to get on the plane. At first, it was very surprising to me. But people also use alcohol or other substances to alter their state to get themselves on the plane. So none of this is recommended. And I know you can work your way out of the high anxiety and find yourself flying with so much more ease as you bring down your entire heightened, frazzled nervous system. I've had clients report how surprised they were when flying after we worked together, but we were not working specifically on flying. We were working on other issues, their anxiety and stress level as a whole. And it was when the amygdala finally knew when to stand down, meaning when there was no inherent danger in the present moment, that is when the anxiety turned to excitement for them to be on the plane, because their amygdala was not so on high alert that even a little bit of an exciting feeling felt like it was danger. This can happen. You don't need to work on all of your specific anxious feelings or problems. When you work on calming down your nervous system, many things will fall away. So back to that medication option. Yeah, there's short-term medications and there's people are on regular medications. Obviously, this is a personal choice, but I know you can get beyond that. I've seen it time and time again. You can also get help, again, professionally. You can talk to coaches, therapists, and you can join support groups or online resources that can help you with their materials. You can join our support group and talk to other people who have had issues flying. What did they do to work it out? What were their favorite things when they were still anxious about flying? What did they do? It's really interesting to talk to people who are going through the same issues as you. Some of the things you want to do when you are afraid of flying is look into statistical safety. Look into the whole fact that there are so many regulations around flying and advanced technologies and the highly trained professionals, the pilots, the flight attendants, the air traffic controllers and maintenance crews. They have had rigorous training and certification processes to ensure their competence and safety. Pilots in particular undergo extensive training in simulators and must meet stringent requirements for experience and skill. And I don't know if you know any, but I know some pilots, and they are not only trained originally, but they have to retrain or recertify whatever, like ongoing, so that they know they are doing great. And in air travel, there's continuous improvement. There's emergency preparedness. And sometimes, even though we know all of these safety things that are going on with flying, the fear of flying persists. And this fear is often fueled by sensationalized media coverage of aviation incidents, which can distort the perception of risk. But we do want to recognize that these incidents are rare outliers in an industry characterized by a strong safety record. Often people, when they learn these things and they read it in various places, they start feeling more comfortable. Flying is an incredibly safe mode of transportation, thanks to all the regulations, advanced technology, and our wonderfully highly trained professionals and continuous improvement efforts. And so while the fear of flying is understandable, it's important to acknowledge the overwhelming evidence of aviation safety and trust in the expertise of those responsible for ensuring it. Now, like I said, episode 1031 will be part 2 of Wings of Courage. That will be the step-by-step guide for overcoming the fear of flying. I hope this is helpful for you. I know a lot of you out there are maybe anxious flyers, nervous flyers, panic flyers, but we can change all of that. And now for today's quote. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. And that's from Nelson Mandela. I'll be back in a few more days with another podcast. Until then, be well and aloha.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode of the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. Find more information at theanxietycoachespodcast.com.